the time of avaricious men, lost in their lust for power, baby. Here they come again. They wave the flag and smile to distract us from the truth. Well, we pay like hell for the lies they tell. The thieves are on the loose. Don't go along with that. Land of the free. Tonight we have a guest. Our guest is Mr. Chris Locke, who's going to be speaking to us from Japan. And Chris is an extremely interesting person. We first met, he and I think it's somewhere around 17 years ago, but never in person, not in the same physical space. So without further ado and mumbling through it, I'm going to introduce Chris. Chris, come on, how you doing?
Hello, Michael. Wonderful to finally be speaking to you face to face, although not in person. I'm fine. Just about recovered from my pulled back, which I did about a month ago. Yeah, I'm fine, and I hope you are too.
Good, good. Well, you know, I did that little basic, we met 17 years ago kind of a thing. I think more importantly, at least for now, is that you tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background on who you are, whatever you want to share about in terms of your life. And then I'm going to start asking you some specific stuff about the Meyer case. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it's been a long life, so I'll try and cut it, make it very brief. I'm born in London, and I'm still actually British. Although I wanted to become Australian, my family all gradually moved over to Australia, and I had permanent residence there. I was living there before I ended up finally coming back to Japan. In England, I studied art first, then architecture at Kingston, what is now Kingston University. Came out here to Japan, visited Thailand, Australia. Lived in Australia for about a year. Worked there as an architectural technician on Townsville Airport. Designing, doing the drawings for their airport. They didn't have drawings for their building. I think they're making the place international airport. So they hired me to do the drawings for the buildings that already existed, kind of backwards, straight doing things. But anyway, I left there when I was about 30 and came back to Japan. I've been to Japan for a short visit. Ended up staying for 6 months by accident. And when I was in Australia, I remade contact with a Japanese friend who invited me to come back and try and help him sell his royal jelly, and also to teach English. Yeah, so it might be interesting. My contract had run out as an architectural technician. I was offered another job actually up in Darwin. Similar position. This is after Cyclone Tracy, so Darwin was very small back then. You know, most people had moved out. I got a job there, but it was so remote. You know, I thought I can't stay here for the next 30 years. Where I was in North Queensland was remote enough. You know, but Darwin back then was just. I thought, no, I can't stay here. So I turned down the position and then came back to Japan because my friend gave me the offer to help him. So when I came back here to Japan, I helped him for a bit and taught English, just evenings, single, so I was free, and pursued my own interests and studies, which are many. And gradually, the teaching English took over more and more time. I was offered more and more work, and it was the only job I never really thought I had to leave. You know, I enjoyed it, and so I just carried on. And eventually, went to college and university work, and I studied applied linguistics while I was in correspondence. That was actually with a non-accredited university. I did my PhD in semiotics, which is a branch of applied linguistics. And from that, just started teaching at university. I'm just finishing my final classes now. I've got 2 classes. I'm 74, 75 in January. And I'll be working my final 6 months next year. But basically, that's me in a nutshell, I guess. I haven't really covered the interests, but maybe we can get to that.
Sure. So it sounds like quite obviously you have a strong academic background. I guess that'd be the understatement. And I am curious, how did you get into photography and get to a high professional level with it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I've always been interested in art and photography. So I first got interested in photography when I was 17. I hitchhiked, when I was 16, I hitchhiked to Spain, France and Spain, and took this tiny little plastic Kodak camera. You know, they were breakable, hard plastic things back in those days that my father had. I took that with me and took a few photos. And when I got home and looked at the photos, they were so atrocious. I thought, oh, I've got to learn how to take some good photos. So there was this trip to Spain, which was an adventure for me. So I was on my own, only 16 years old, you know, and it was a great opportunity. I came up with these failed photos. So as soon as I could, saved up some money and got a single lens reflex camera, decided to take photos. And developed that a little bit in art school when I was there. But the problem at art school is we had a photography department, but there was no teacher there. It was like it's a dark room. We could go in there and use it. So I taught myself to use that. And after that, I went to University of Kingston, which was then Kingston Polytechnic School of Architecture. There were no universities with architecture courses back in those days. They were all schools of architecture. There were only about half a dozen in the country. But when there, it was the same there. I studied drawing, of course, and also doing some photography of architecture. But there's a similar situation there. They just had a dark room and no teacher. So I taught myself again in there. So basically in photography, I'm completely self-taught. Now, when I was at Kingston, in my final year there, I heard of the Society of Architectural Illustrators, or illustrations, which I think back in England. It just started up. And I liked the sound of that and wrote to them and sent them some samples of my work. And they accepted me as what in those days was an associate. I maintained that contact with them. Even when I came out to Asia, we kind of let it go loose a bit, and I lost a bit of contact. But every now and then I remake contact with them. And then I started getting more into photography. But in 1996, they contacted me and said, we would like to have a contact in Japan, and you're there. Would you be our coordinator with JARA, the Japan Architectural Renderers Association? And I thought that'd be interesting. So I thought, yeah, that'd be good. The only problem is, what am I going to do? I couldn't really set up in my studio a drawing board and stuff. It would take up too much time, too much money, too much space. Couldn't really do that. And so I said, well, how about if I do photography? That would be easier for me to handle. Plus, I had to send work to them every year. Easier to send photographs, and easier for me to keep and store photographs. I didn't have a computer yet in 1996, so we weren't online. I was even little personal processor. And so basically I said yes, and they said, okay, yes, you can do photography. That'd be good. We can add that to our list of sections that we do. So I did that, and I started taking photographs of professional quality. Now, there were minimal professional quality. We couldn't use like a 35mm camera. The lowest grade we were allowed was 6x7 camera, which is or negatives, they're 120 film. So we use negatives about 3 times the size or 4 times the size of 35 millimeter. And it's a big heavy camera. Basically it's a studio camera. But I take it out and use it as a heavy handheld camera. It's just doable, you know, if you're careful. If you've got strong arms like you have. It's a heavy camera. So I started doing that, and they accepted me as a photographer, and that led on. Gradually got better, and I've got some work there. There was a Japanese magazine at the time called Kansai Time Out. Kansai is the area of Japan, West Japan, where I live. That includes Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, Kobe, and a few other areas near there. This was a magazine which was kind of echoing the New York and London Time Out magazine, and what's on. Maybe this is all pre-computer era, 1996.
Pre-computer time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, because people may be wondering, well, why are you talking about photography and all? Let's jump into where we're going in that sense, because you will have more to say about photography and your own experience with it. How and when did you find the Billy Meier case? What was that about for you?
Yeah, okay. This is actually it's a difficult question to answer because I don't really remember when. It's so long ago. And actually, I might first have heard of Billy Meier, not his name, but the character. When I was 17, and after I'd been to Spain, I hitchhiked across to Istanbul. And I met these 2 Germans who got talking to. And I think it was huge. I mean, the smaller one was about 6'4", and the other one was 6'8", 7'2". It was only 5'6" or 7. But anyway, we got talking, and they said we talked about traveling to different countries and gaining experience. And so we know this guy in Germany or Switzerland, in Europe, who traveled around a lot, and we realized it's very good experience to travel around and get experiences in different cultures, ways of thinking, and so on. And it was very odd, you know, the way they said it. And I actually remember this because it was just like the explanation that Samyaza gave to Billy as to why he had to travel abroad. And I wonder, were they actually talking about Billy? You know, we certainly didn't mention his name, but there was no need to, you know. And they might not have known him, maybe they just heard of him too. But it was a subject, everyone was traveling around at that time to gain experience. So that might have been my first time I'd actually heard of him, but not his name. Now his name, and what I actually remember is the book at the top here, above my head, the Wendell Stevens book, the UFO Contact in the Pleiades. In 1984, I went to Korea with a German friend of mine to renew our cultural visas to stay in Japan. We had to do that back in those days. Big permanent residence, very, very difficult. And when we came back from that visit in 1984, we went into the biggest bookstore in Osaka City, downtown. And we were looking through the English books there because we listened to the Japanese, but they had an English section. And staring at me was this book, you know, on the shelf there. And I pointed to my German friend and said, "Look at that." And he said, "You knew I was interested in UFOs. I've been interested in UFOs. That's another long story, which goes back to my youth again in England. I had my first UFO sightings. And he said, "Would you want it? Do you want it, Chris?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And he bought it for me. Yeah. And that was the beginning, really, of me getting really interested. I mean, when I started reading, I couldn't put it down for the whole thing, right? It's such a big book. There's a lot in there. And at the
Well,
time, 1984,
mhm.
that was all there really was about Billy. But soon I was to hear a lot more because there were people from America coming over to Japan, putting on um, lectures, presentations, workshops, and so on. And New Age people. And every now and then, Billy's name would crop up. And I also actually met, this was in the 1980s, you probably know Sean Morton.
Mhm.
He came over. And this was a time when he had just visited me in Switzerland. And he'd taken photographs from Woody's album. So he was showing us the photographs that he had just taken in his visit to see Billy. And the news back then, this is when Billy was almost dead. In a very bad way. And Sean was telling us, this is all we knew. I mean, this was secondhand information. Other than talking to Billy, this is the best information we got. And he said, "Oh, Billy's dying. It's all kind of over. You know." And he just told us what he knew. And then after that, there were these people like Mr. Royal coming over and doing what was obviously their own interpretation, using
Right.
Billy's stuff,
Well,
plagiarizing it for their own purposes.
let me ask you then, um, as someone who had begun and had been, let's say, pursuing the study of photography and photography itself, when you see Meyer's photographs, his UFO photographs, what happened? What did you think, and how did that play into your, your
Yeah.
own sense of where you were going to go in life with things?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question. I often think about this myself and ask myself, because I remember I taught myself photography. I'm rather weak on the science side. I've got some friends here, Japanese friends here, who are very strong on the science side of photography. And one of them is a very famous UFO photographer in Osaka, one of my best friends here. When I looked at this photo here, when I saw this on the cover here of Ella Stevens, I knew instinctively there was something very genuine about that. It took me a long time to work out what it actually is. You have to kind of analyze it and realize what you're actually looking at. And I wasn't used to doing that. I was an artist. It was very intuitive. Just go by my own senses and my own feelings. But the more I got into this, the more I was forced to have to look at it analytically and work things out. Actually, why do I actually feel? Why do I feel this is a genuine problem? And with that one, you can actually see it by your head. We've got a very good from the day out here, and that's the same photo. Yeah. And it's a good example because there we're seeing the atmospheric atmosphere, the light shining through the mist there around the UFO, and you can't fake that, right? And that tells you there's a distance there in terms of meters, many meters. So we actually know this from our own evolution. When we used to go hunting or whatever, we learn to read this distance and the mist and things. It's within us. We instinctively recognize this. And I was picking that up. I knew that, but it's not good enough. We have to go and explain it scientifically. So I got more into trying to look at that, and that's what I did with Francisco in the book that year there.
So that would be
where I go into analyzing that a bit more, explaining it a bit more scientifically, the actual scientific terms to use there.
Would people would be able to get into understanding more of what you're speaking about in your process in your books, the two books that you have with Francisco, I would assume, yes?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It was only then that I really got into kind of analyze, okay, why do I feel this thing? And when I started working with Francisco, I wasn't sure where it was going to go, and I made a condition with him up front. I said, look, we have to go with the data and what it's going to tell us. Where it goes, that's where we go. Are you in agreement with that? And he said, yes, that's what we've got to do. And that was great, actually, to work with him, knowing that he was genuine on that. And he's a very genuine guy, Francisco. Although I'd never actually spoken with him, I could tell from his emails. And we would both make mistakes if we were going along, correct each other. And really, like, yes, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know if you are aware that my webmaster, Melissa Osaki, did some more work on these photographs too. And if you don't know, we'll send you links to her work on it.
I have seen those, Michael. Yeah, it's very well done. Yeah. Yeah, congratulate her. Yeah. And your the blogs that you put up, whenever you put up a new the latest contact report from Billy, I always forward that to my Facebook page. It always goes up there. Your latest one is up there yesterday. I could put that up there. So I think I put hers up there as well. So they're on there. If you go to my Facebook page, you scroll down, they're all there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that, of course, very much. Well, I think you also, you've had some other kinds of experiences in your life, and I always am interested in letting people describe what's happened to them and their own personal experiences. A lot of things I've been skeptical about things, and I've had strange experiences of my own. So when somebody intelligent starts describing an interesting experience, I want them to be able to bring that to our forum here as well. So why don't you tell the folks what I'm alluding to?
Depends what experience you're talking about there, Mike. I have had many, many remarkable experiences, and I look back over the years. Probably the most significant one for me personally was when I experienced what in Japanese Zen they call satori, which surprisingly is a very rare experience. I just went back and read this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, by Ryu Suzuki. I bought this a long time ago. It's an old book. And he's one of the people who took Zen to America. He never experienced Satori. It's that rare an experience, And another Brits who's married to a Japanese who sometimes lives in Canada as well, interviewed me once and said, yes, it's very odd that you've had this experience, because so many people don't. And I had this experience in 2001, September 17th, 2001, about 2:30 in the morning. And it's the most remarkable experience. It's actually the experience that the Buddha had when he experienced enlightenment. And in our modern day times, the Indian guru, or Sadhguru, he's had this experience too. Now there's a lot, I need to write a book on this, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about it and people who experience it. It needs to be cleared up. The problem is so few people have experienced it. There's so few records. What's actually going on? And I myself keep questioning specifically what is going on. And I've called upon, I had a paper published in Alsace University of Arts, and there's two actually, where I mentioned the experience, what triggered it in my case. There's a painting which I think probably works like the Japanese coin. the Zen koan, where you concentrate, and eventually the concentration and meditation becomes so strong that it triggers this experience where these energies is poured through the body and up into the brain. And you're going to die into yours. It's like dying, you know, but you're still here. And Joseph Campbell has written about this in his books. He calls it the mythic death. It's like dying, but you're still here. I mean, you can talk a lot about this, but what does it mean to people? You know, and the same problem exists in
Yes, well,
in
this
the
is
Zen era, in the Zen field. You know,
a lot of people, you know, nowadays are not as familiar with some of the context. I think there was a lot more familiarity perhaps around Zen and that type of thing going back 20, 30, 40 years, etc.
yeah.
I remember hearing more about it in the 70s and 80s. But I was also thinking that you had another experience about, I think, what was it, 35 years ago, with something that you might call an abduction. And
Oh, that's right.
not
Yeah.
familiar with
Okay. Yeah.
what was that about?
Well, this is very interesting again. This was back in the 80s when I was having, you know, my friend was working with the guy in Tokyo, who I also know, who puts on all these workshops, invites these new age people over from America. And the 80s was huge in Japan for UFOs. You know, Junichi Yao and putting all out on TV. It was all happening. And I was very, very into this. And I first started to have my first visions, if you like, in when I was about 34, I think. This is a very good friend of mine who's actually in the New Age field. We eventually ended up losing contact. You know, she thought my Saturday experience was actually related to her work. She couldn't understand it was actually related to something else. But anyway, sorry, what was your question then, Michael?
It was about the thing, I
Oh, the
guess,
abduction.
the abduction, right? Exactly.
Yeah, right. So so I was having these dreams and things, and I was keeping the dream diary because a lot of these were rather very unusual. And there's one where I was walking on water at this place, and it was a very strange place. And then the next week, I happened to see a picture of Giant's Causeway in Ireland, and it was the place in my dream where I saw that. How did I know that? You know, it's odd. You know, I can't really explain it. You know, it's just an odd experience. You know, but other ones would come along, and then I had this one. I made contact with these people who allegedly had contact with aliens. You know, and one night I had this dream of this, and in this dream I saw or sensed a UFO. I can't remember now. I actually saw a UFO flying across. Nothing discernible shape-wise. There wasn't even any light in there. And I just kind of in my dream telepathically said, if you're nice people, let's meet and talk, you know, and discuss it. And I heard this booming kind of voice saying, "You cannot comprehend." And then my consciousness was just clicked off in an instant. And then there was an explosion of golden bright light in my head, and I woke up. I thought, wow, what the hell is this? And as I looked in my room, like golden light was kind of shining everywhere. And it was actually like coming from inside yourself, you know, like it wasn't objectively out there in the room. I was kind of looking through something in myself. And then I thought, what's this thing? It was just stinging, on my left hand, on the knuckle of my little finger. And I looked at it, and there was a scoop there, a missing piece of flesh. It was all red around. It was stinging, and it had this kind of antiseptic smell to it. Abducted, what's going on? And I thought, I've got to take a photograph of this. But I got my camera, but it was a 50mm lens, and I couldn't focus on it. I was trying to take it. I took a photo, but it was all blurred, and you couldn't really make anything out. But I took that to a friend, a young Japanese guy, in his tarot shop or fortune telling place downtown. And I noted the time. When I woke up, it was 8:15 in the morning. So I thought, okay, I've got the time. I'll get him to draw up an astrological chart. What was going on here? Did you see anything here? No. Did I meet anybody? Did anybody, maybe you can figure something out or see something. And so I went along, I saw him, I explained the situation. And he said, oh, I'll check it out. So he drew up a chart for me at that time. Which I've actually got somewhere. And he was able to tell me a few things, not very much, of course. And he said, well, it suggests a meeting with some kind of intelligence, very intelligent. There's a high intelligence involved in this. And there's an indication of another time or space or place, but he wasn't quite sure which. So it seems to be kind of in a cycle. It might be recurring. But I've never had anything recurring like this. It's just a one-off experience. I said to him, like, what I really want to know is, you say this is an intelligence. Are these good people? Are they bad people? Are they neutral? What am I dealing with here? And he said, well, my intention is nothing bad. There's nothing. It seems good, and they seem to have your interests at heart. Well, you could tell that. And that was about it. I wasn't able to take it anywhere further with that. And it's always been a question, what actually happened there? What was actually going on? And just recently, I've heard, you might be able to help me out here, Michael, actually. Some recent information about the people in Shasta. What was it? The alien section group that was there. And they were there until about, I think it was the 1990s, they left. And we began let them go, or they went off somewhere. And that is very interesting to me because in 1996, when Hale Bock came by the Earth, I went with my UFO photographer Japanese friend and two of his friends. He was actually ex-editor of the Sankei Shimbun, Sankei newspaper. And we put on a huge UFO exhibition when outside the World Trade Center opened. Very successful. We went up to the top of Mount Icoma to photograph Hale Bock. And we had our camera set up, but we knew where it was going to come up. On the space in there. And the night sky started coming in. It was just dark blue sky, clear sky. It wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was sitting over. It's going to appear any time now. It's going to be there. We're going to catch it. And I just happened to turn my neck up and look right above me. Like, what the hell is that? And we all looked up, and there was this golden pulsating light. We were, what? Yeah, and then cameras, get the cameras. They're all on tripods facing this other direction. So when we got the cameras, by then it disappeared. This pulsating UFO or whatever it was, it disappeared. And
Well,
that kind of got me
I
wondering,
want to ask you
what on earth
something.
is that? And I'm wondering now whether that was possibly those Andromedans who were not Andromedans, I forget what they're called now, who were in Shasta. I heard that they actually fly in golden UFO. And I'm wondering, could it possibly have been them who they're leaving? They just happened to call by and say, "Okay, we're off now. We're going now. Bye."
You
But I've
know,
never had anything seen. And it's
we
always
might
just
have a
been an unsolved
photograph.
question.
We might have a photograph that you'll have a chance to look at probably when you watch this interview. I'll have inserted it hopefully. So
Okay.
I do want to ask you this. Because you have an academic background, you got into photography and into the study of Zen and all. So you found the Billy Meier material, but let's come back and see if there is anything you want to say about any relationship or lack of relationship between what's in the Meyer material, the teaching and all, and the Eastern tradition, the Zen tradition. Was there an affinity for Meyer's material because of that, or what would you say about it, since you have familiarity with both?
Yeah, this is a very difficult matter actually, and I've been looking at this a lot. And I've been meditating on my Satori experience for the last 22 years. It's 22 years ago, and really, in his book, Meditations, I've got it here somewhere. What can I? What in that at my fingertips? Oh, here it is. Introduction to Meditation by Billy. Now, in here, I can't remember exactly where, but he actually, I read it somewhere else. He mentions your creational energy perception. And when I heard that, really, that is it. That's exactly it. After the Satori experience, your consciousness has changed. It's permanent. You never go back to where you were before. Now, of course, when you're working, you're just concentrating on your work and your job, and that's what you're focused on. But when you sit back and relax, and you're free, the default state of your consciousness is different. And I would say it is that. When Billy said that, I said, Billy, that is so beautiful. That's exactly it. If you're there, that's it. And it's extraordinary. I get this time and again with Billy's material. I'll hear of something. I go, oh, thank you, Billy. It's exactly what I thought. And some of these things I had to work out for myself. After the experience, the Satori experience, the one thing I first realized right away is that my personality will not survive. And I think people in the world are actually saying it. Now, in the Eastern tradition, you do have that. But it didn't really tell you what's going on, And the closest, I think, is yoga, where they say the consciousness goes on and is reincarnated in the future into a different personality. And I think, well, yeah, okay, yeah, reasonable. But what exactly is reincarnated? If it's not the person, what's actually reincarnated? I mean, if you say consciousness, what consciousness, And I got very involved in the ringmakers material as well, which is actually where my Satori actually came from. It was the code, which figured my experience. And in there, they talk about different levels of consciousness to it. And this is what interests me greatly about Billy. He does this in great detail. Now, I only know from my own experience as far as Satori. From that, I don't know the particular state of consciousness. Well, I do know the state of consciousness which survives death, because you're kind of with it, you're that. But there's more, because when you actually do die, it's obviously bigger, and the consciousness is completely gone because a new one has to come up. What's going on there is not explained clearly in the Eastern tradition anywhere. And what interests me about Billy though is he does do that. Now, I can't know empirically that he's right, obviously. But it makes sense, and it's the best explanation that I've heard. The other closest one is James Meyer, the author of all the remakes materials. He gets very close to this too, but he's more pictorial. He doesn't want art and painting. There are philosophical treatises about it. But I find Billy just goes into a bit more detail there. So regarding the Eastern tradition, the Zen experience and the Enlightenment experience, to me, that comes closest when Billy's talking about pure creation energy perception. And another interesting thing for me was when I first heard of Billy, and I first heard of the word creation, there wasn't a clear explanation given available online. This was 1980s or early 1990s. And I remember thinking, yeah, Billy, you're wrong. Like, creation isn't that. Creation is a thing, right? I'm an artist, right? An artist's creation is what it's this thing you make. And the universe, if it's a creation, then who created this creation? But the more I thought about it, over a period of years, 2 or 3 years, keep thinking about this and going back to it. And eventually I spoke, what is the universe in its entirety? And it's not like a creation. Again, was my criticism video at that time. It's not a thing. It's not a creation. It's an ongoing process. But then I began to think, so what do you call that person? You want to talk about that as a thing. What word are you going to use? And if you look at it from that point of view, creation is actually a reasonable word to use. The only problem is initially you're going to put a wall of skepticism. It doesn't seem to fit. But as with all advanced concepts, the more you look at it, the simpler it gets. And the simple thing is actually hard to comprehend. I mean, who really understands E equals MC squared? It's a very simple equation. But I don't really understand what the interest is of it,
Well, Chris, let me ask you, just because we're running out of time, maybe we would also be able, in a subsequent visit, to go into some other information about the connection that you have with the Nostradamus material and tying it into some of Billy's prophecies as well, because I think people would be interested in that. And I mentioned to you that there's a photograph, I'm going to try to find it, that I think will relate to what you were talking about the golden light and all. And I'll be inserting it in here if I can come up with it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and thank you, this kind of holistic trip that our lives are, and we never know at a given moment what's going to tie in at some other time and how it will go. So I am going to encourage people, to get in touch, and we carry your books here in our bookstore, and I'll have a link to that bookstore as well in our video here. So let me thank you for the opportunity, and we will certainly be in touch about all of the various other things that are in our ongoing discussion among the people who study this material. So
well, thank you, Mikey. That's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you. I respect all your work and the way you stand up to all the criticism that comes. I'm lucky, actually. I don't face a lot of criticism. where I am. Japan's remarkably open-minded, in this respect.
That's a
So,
blessing right there. Yeah, unfortunately, in America, the UFO topic is novelty, entertainment. Lots of people with zero ability, background, experience, research, skills, who simply get involved so they can feel like they're involved in something important, and they become very easy fodder for the misleading elements, the government and disinformation. So it's all clouded up here with chasing lights in the sky, and young people and older people who have nothing else going, pardon me, in their lives and have no other accomplishments. So this is the easy field. But in having a conversation with you and just touching upon parts of your life and your background and academia and Zen and this and that and the other thing, and here you have 2 books that you've done with Francisco, I think people will be enriched by getting these books and learning more. So again,
if I might say, Michael, just in finally, I did with the Society of Architectural Illustrators. I do head up their photography section, and I made this photography page on the website there. So there is a fair amount of photography work I have done, and I did work in Printifern in their photography department. So I have a little bit of actual experience there. We didn't talk much about that. But anyway, thank you again for inviting me on, Marcus. My pleasure.
Thank you. All right, Chris, we will speak again. I thank you.
Okay, thank you.
In our preceding conversation, Chris Locke stated that he saw a golden pulsating light above him during an experience that he was having. And in Contact Report 39, December 3rd, 1975, as contained in this volume from Wendell Stevens, in the Message from Pleiades, Volume 2, we see this information about Mount Shasta, where Billy Meier is asking Semyaze about it, and she explains that it's a volcano in North America. If you draw your attention to this, you see in the 260th sentence, she said they're golden-colored spaceships of spherical form. These are what are often seen, and it's interesting because when we look at the article, UFO Photographed over Mammoth Mountain Area in California, that's published on Rents, January 1st, 2001, we see a photograph by Ron Resnick, a photographer I knew back in Los Angeles. Here, it's a nice panoramic view, and on the left-hand side, above the clouds, a little white dot. And Ron didn't notice anything particular about it until he developed or processed his film, and he saw this object, which he then zoomed in on and enlarged further here, and we see a golden spherical object. Could that be connected to the Hyperboreans, the extraterrestrials who used to live in the Mount Shasta area? Could that have been what Chris Locke was seeing during his very interesting experience? Salome.
First will be the flag, then what you can eat and drink. Next will be your attitude, what you say you're feeling thing. Then before you know it, you're a number without a name. We're under attack, we better push back so we don't